So welcome everyone to this Essential Model Documentation user drop-in session. The EMD team, so David and Charlotte and Dan, are going to be running through some demos, but there'll be plenty of opportunity for question and answer as well. So I'll hand over to Dan to just get going with the demos.
Cool. Hello. In a second, I'll show you kind of a screen of where to get all the information regarding to the EMD. But just before we start, could we get that anyone who has started or tried to submit an EMD or interacted with the system just to raise their hand on WhatsApp? Not WhatsApp. Yeah. So we've got Matt. We've got Michael. And cool, just lovely. So two of you have tried to interact with it. It might have not been in the perfect state, so that's all improving. For those of you that haven't, we'll just kind of go through some of the basics and explain to where to find information and how to get to the system that we need. And then after I kind of show you the documentation and kind of all the links, David would kind of do a quick demo of how to go through it and what to expect. So the first page that we're going to look at, I will send all the links out in a second, is the kind of emd.mipcvs.dev webpage. This is where we will update any kind of changes to the procedure or any new updates or tools that might start existing. So if you need something in documentation, this is where it will appear. And this has everything for submitters and reviewers and just general kind of documentation standards, etc. So this is the home page. We can see kind of we have some updates which will appear in a box like this. So recently we've made a progress tracker, which allows you to kind of keep track of what you've submitted. But until we get to there, that might be less useful. It also gives you some updates. So for instance, we've introduced an easier way to contact us if there's something with your submission. We'll send out the email, but the email would be emd@wcrp-cmip.org. And this would allow us to get back to you. So if you have something slightly more urgent for a deadline or some queries and the discussion boards aren't getting an answer fast enough, this would get sent to myself, David, Charlotte, and some of the reviewers where we might be able to assist a little bit easier. So it'd be worth noting that down. If you've never interacted with EMD and you don't really know what it is, we do have some information on the homepage saying what it is, what it contains, and why it's useful. But your port of call would be to, on the left-hand side menu, you can see my cursor, there's an EMD specification. That takes you to Zenodo and gives you a nice list of the document and what needs to be in the EMD. So it's very comprehensive, but it is worth reading because once you start submitting, if you make a mistake, the reviewer will ask you to correct the changes, and then there's a lot of backwards and forwards and a lot of time lost where getting it right in first instance should be kind of a priority. The next step that might be of interest would be kind of the information for submitters button. You've got kind of a submission guide that kind of tells you roughly all the different stages. So we have 4 distinct stages. The first stage effectively is saying the lattice you're going to submit on, so our grid cells. Then we have for our simulation, computational grids. So we kind of have a combination of these to form our horizontal and vertical domains. Afterwards, we register our components, and combining those components, we have our source ID or model components. Finding out where the forms are, each of these has a separate form, but there is a link that David would show you that is here at the top of this page, and it allows you to see all the issues that are available, and you can choose which stage you submit at. There are different ways to access this, and they often have multiple hyperlinks all across the website, so finding out the issues should be, or the GitHub forms would be a fairly easy way. We've got a link on using the GitHub forms. They are generic forms where the drop-downs are pre-populated and they get updated periodically throughout the day. And then you have some free text and kind of normal input fields where you have to enter. And there is also a kind of what to expect in submission. Just might clear up some of the things when you submit. You might get some messages.
Dan, can I just? I noticed that Michael's got his hand up for a question.
Okay.
That was accident. Sorry.
Yep. I will ask the questions at the end, so if you do think of
Yeah.
anything, I can comment to that. So generally, it kind of gives you an idea of what to expect, and we kind of might update this a little bit if something's changed. But in essence, you fill out the form. This gets converted into an issue, so we'll see this in the demo in a second. That basically is a formatted text version of your form inputs. It then gets processed by automatic scripts. So ESG-Voc is a library for being used by the CVs, and that is kind of used by ESGF to see is your submission valid or not. And so it basically has a class or a set of functions that act like a set of tests. So some things that we can check programmatically, it will try to do that. For instance, is your region real? Is it a string? So you might get a table of corrections where it should tell you, oh, this is wrong, it should be one of these, and it might give you some useful hints on how to correct it. The idea here is if it is an obvious solution, you can go back and edit your script. I will share, we have another link that tells you how to edit the script. You can go back, you can do that, and then it can keep going through until it's all successful. And so this saves the human interaction aspect in the first instance. The second part would be when it generates the files that you will need that will go into the EMD and they get reviewed by a reviewer, because there are certain things we can program in, but many things like the description and whether or not it's valid, it's a little bit harder to assess. So kind of that scientific knowledge is why we need the review. So once you get all your automatic checks being passed, you get a pull request appearing, and this kind of creates a different page. The pull request itself has kind of the files that are generated from your form, how they look. This is more for the reviewers, so less so for yourself, but just because it will appear, it's useful to know what it is and why it is, why it exists, and it might give I think David's going to go for an example. It might give you some suggestions of how similar it is to existing entries. So the way we check for things like grids, we don't want lots and lots of grids with the same name where different people are actually referencing the same item, but they have different names. So we have a similarity checker that checks all the external links it might have. And then we also have the fields that we can't check that way, a similarity check on how similar kind of the set of words in it is. So that's all those reports will show us. Finally, once a reviewer goes through and reviews, you will kind of see a couple of messages saying it's been approved, you might have had some changes that are requested, or ultimately things like grids, once they're registered, you'll get a kind of a number saying this is your grid, and this will be reflected on the ID of your submission. So I'll kind of talk you through, well, I'll show you the progress report if I can get to it, and then show you a demo of kind of what you might expect from like reviewer comments, for instance. So here is the example I showed earlier. It's from Rachel. She has submitted a set of grids. These files here, for instance, have been merged, so then they're already in the EMD. This happens with the model family. So our first step, we can start off defining our grids, and we can also say what components and what model families, should they not already exist, are out there. If they already exist, then you can reference them. You don't need to re-register them again. The next step, as I mentioned, was defining our computational grids. And so these have made it through. And finally here, you can see she is at stage 3, registering her components. We've had some that have been approved. We're going through. This one, for instance, has been approved. It's awaiting to be merged. So we have one reviewer that checks the content. The other that just has a quick glance, says, yeah, that everything in that review has been met. I will insert it into the EMD. And then we have kind of changes requested that might have a little bit of a conversation again. So if I click on the changes requested, for instance, it'll open up the conversation. So we have, so this is our issue. At the bottom of our issue, I mentioned once all checks are passed, it creates a pull request. If I open that up, Inside that pull request, we have that copy of our files that are being created. We have that little bit of a report. We can kind of see all the files that are linked. In other words, in this case, it's a component. The only external link it has is to the scientific domain of ocean. And then this is the file that links to it. It might have a bit of a description. In this case, ocean is ocean, so it doesn't have much of a description. And it has some similarity kind of content for the reviewers. When we make a comment or a change, this is a review, we can kind of do highlighting a code and add some questions. So for instance, this is fine, but the link points to a page that's a specific release. Do you want to point out to all generic releases? When we send this, an automatic action will also copy that message across to our original issue, and it'll tell you who the reviewer was, what they've said, what file they've commented on, and copy the content. So it appears in two places, just in case you might miss one of them. It also, underneath it, tells you where to add your comment. So it says, if you want to reply to this, add your comment onto the pull request. And so you can kind of click on that, do so. And so we have kind of this progress report that allows you to see what stage you're at. If someone's commented on the requested changes, and then if you make the changes made flag comes up to tell the reviewers to review it once again. If you then also wanted to add a new issue, for instance, this is a shortcut to the template that will fill out the form. I'm not currently logged into this browser, but if I was, it will open up in kind of the form to enter the next set of information. So this submission tracker makes it nice and easy to go, oh, I've completed this step, I can go into the next one, click new, and continue. So there are multiple ways to get to those forms. But the main point is every change that happens and every link and every description will be on the Essential Model Documentation page. Any information that you want for submitters can be added in one of these menus. And if there is anything missing, feel free to highlight it. We are actively developing it. This didn't exist about 2 weeks ago, so there's a lot of content that's appeared. It will need a few iterations to be a little bit clearer, a little bit tidier. So any feedback, if it's good or bad, is very helpful in all cases. I'm now going to stop sharing. Are there any questions with anything I have just mentioned? If not, if you get questions in the meantime, you can also put them in the chat. Yeah, James?
Just to clarify, thanks, Dan, for all that. That was really clearly presented, I thought. Just about one of the last things you said about replying in issues versus pull requests. Is it always better to reply in the pull request, like the little prompt says there that shows up on the issue to reply, here's the pull request link? Is that always preferred, that the discussion happens in the pull request?
Yes.
Not the
so
issue.
The issue is what gets created from the form. If you want to edit what gets generated by the script that creates your files, you edit the issue, and that will update it and automatically just rerun all the scripts. The review process happens once those files are generated. So the reviewer will comment on that, and it makes sense for any responses to be below the reviews. So I have written it in such a way, as I mentioned, any reviews get copied to the issues, but ideally they should be in the pull request, and then you can kind of see review a question, submitter answer, review a question, submitter answer, and that conversation is nice and clear. If for some reason you accidentally enter it in the issue, eventually it will still get picked up. But in terms of the catching it automatically, when you comment back on a review on the pull request, that comes up automatically in GitHub, whereas otherwise we'd have to just periodically check the issue. So it's more likely to get caught earlier if it is in pull request.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Cool. If there are no other questions, I'll hand over to David to do a bit of a live demo on.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe one quick question to
course.
start. because we started and then we were not sure how to edit part of these forms and then continue. Like, I mean, it sounded to us like we have to know everything at once for a grid, and then we didn't know how to, continue. Yep.
In which case, yes, so I will quickly, bear with me 1 second, open up on how to edit an issue, and then send the link over. Ideally, you would fill it in one go, just because we compare any grid to existing grids, but you can't fill all grids in one go. And so you might potentially want to have a spreadsheet between your organizations. For things like editing, we are fine for things like model components. If your description or you want to add some new references, editing those later on makes the metadata much, much better. For grids, it's a little bit more difficult because we don't want duplicates of grids. So ideally, those kind of get reviewed underneath a bit more scrutiny. So actually, one of the reasons it's taken a little bit long to start is because the heaviest review step where we need to make sure we don't make any mistakes is at the start. It's that grid step 1 process. Everything after it gets progressively quicker and quicker to review. So once all your grids are registered, ideally someone else might be using the same grids, the next step should happen a bit quicker. I am just very quickly going to share a screen. Let me just find the page. And cool. So in the documentation, I will make it a little bit clearer. We've got this screen. Is it in there? And this is just a quick guide on how to edit an issue. Hopefully, if anyone requests any changes, we should also submit it automatically, and I'll try and update the action. So in that bit where it says comment in the pull request, this link also comes up. But in essence, let me just make this a bit bigger. We have our issue. On the right-hand side, there are 3 ellipses, 3 dots that we can kind of click on. And when we click onto those, just go down to next. When we click onto them, we can select edit, and then you type in the answer. So it makes it less rigorous. So your drop downs, you might have to open up the form, figure out what the drop down said before. But we don't expect large issues. This is generally more for minor tweaks or changes to a description or changes to a number, for instance. And then you click save at the bottom, and then we rerun all the issues. If you have lots and lots of changes, sometimes it might actually be easier just to fill in the new form with the data. So it's entirely up to you which method is more convenient for you. But generally, the edit procedure will run it and keep everything in sync and keep it nice and clear that you've made the change. So that's probably what you'd recommend. Has that answered your question, or
Can you go back to the top? Where was it? Where did you start this editing?
So, David's going to potentially point out in a second.
Okay.
Can you see the chat in
Okay.
WebEx at the moment? I've posted the link.
Yeah.
Opens this swipe out, so you can click through it and save it for when you need it.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Just before I carry on, I see John has got a hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so after you've gone into the review phase, how does one know that that there's action waiting for you again? Like, is there an email or something that you get from the process to say that you're ready, that it's ready for you to take further action? Because that's where I am now. I'm wondering when it's ready for me to take action.
So I think I can answer that, and Dan will hopefully add things if I missed him. So you'll certainly get a GitHub notification, because conversation you've been a part of has a new message. So how of course, those are sometimes hard to spot if you get a lot of those in your inbox. But also the new tracker that Dan showed with the nice sort of boxes for each of your issues, that will have a nice big red changes requested label on it for any that are in that state, I believe. But that might not show up. Go on.
So should I do? So is there a keyword I should search for in my emails? Is that like action requested? Or what is? What is?
A suggestion on that.
Shall we? If I share my screen, we can do this in real time. So if we go to the documentation, at the top there's progress tracker. John, can you remind me what your GitHub username was? Do you remember?
I don't know.
13.
Yeah.
John Dunn 13.
Yeah.
So if you use the link that I'll paste back into the chat again, that's the one that's highlighted, John Dunn 13. This is going to be the easiest way to do this. If you enter that, it tells you what stages and what's happened. Here we can see your grid cells. You've registered 2 grids. Both of those have made it through. You've registered the family GFDL. If you wanted to click on these and just double check what's happening, you can always click on it. And if you have changes, you get kind of that information on the pull request where it might tell you kind of if someone's approved it or someone's reviewed it or requested changes. And then if we go back to this page, we have the flashing red changes requested. And that becomes changes made. So if it gets changes requested, it gets a changes made when you update the issue. And that appears as well. So you can kind of see. So this one is currently in review. It hasn't been reviewed. There isn't a review association. Whereas 188 has requested changes on it. So you can click on that. You can then see what the comments are and respond to them. And when you make a change, a bit like we got, have I still got, nope. Basically, you get a notification when it says when you make some changes to the issue. As a reviewer, we get a notification underneath it saying it's been reviewed, it's changed since it's been reviewed, please review again, in other words. And so kind of it gets a changes made, and then if we request more changes, that changes made gets taken out, and that automatically happens on our side. But as far as you're concerned, this is the page that you'd be interested in, and you can kind of see anything that's blue is awaiting, anything that's green and says merged, it's made its way through, and you can continue to the next step, in other words. And so you've entered some vertical computational grids. If you then wanted to add model components, you would click new, and that would open up the next page that you need. And for the comments that I've got, so this review page only works once you've submitted some issues. So if you filled out the form, you enter your GitHub username, anything that you filled out that has passed the automatic checks will appear in this form. If it hasn't passed the automatic checks, make the changes that they request and it will appear. If you have nothing at this point, then the progress tracker is, well, there are no files with something that you filled out with that GitHub username. Does that make sense to you, Priyat?
Yeah, thanks. And is that and that page is linked on the submission guideline so that I can find it from the website?
Yeah, I have just pasted the link in the chat, the one that's relevant to your submissions. And so that will always be relevant to yours. So if you make a copy of that and bookmark it, that's the easiest way. For everyone else, it is the first link on the menu on the documentation page. So it's intentionally put as the first link.
All right, thanks.
Okay. I'll go on from here. So what I'll show you next really covers a lot of the same ground, but I'll show some real examples of various bits of EMD that have been created and merged, and how that process may occur for you. So it could be a very fast or a bit more of a protracted conversation process. So we'll see some real examples. I'll share my screen. 1 second. Okay, so hopefully you see my screen now. So this is the documentation homepage, and just to highlight, there's the progress tracker on the first entry on the menu bar, as Dan was just talking. But what I want to go is information for submitters and the submission guide. And the very first thing I want to go to is to go to all the different submission forms, because these are all the separate forms for submitting different types of EMD. There's a different form for horizontal grids, vertical grids, model components, and so forth. So if we click on the choose a form, we get a whole range of different forms. There's some general ones, blank issue, but we're interested in these grid, component, and so forth forms. And you choose what you want to submit. So say you want to describe some horizontal grid cells, you would click on that, which is stage 1 after all. And it brings up this nice, well, it's a form. So there's some information about what you're doing. Won't go into too much detail, but then there's some place to fill in the information that is the EMD. So this will be a mix of pull down menu selections. So here we can click on this and choose a grid type and a region, and so forth, global. And we can enter some information, like the horizontal resolution might be 0.25 by 0.3, say X and Y. This is all relevant to our grids. And then we can add the southernmost and westernmost latitude to grid cells. I'm going to put some deliberately silly values in here, and I'll explain why in a minute. So let's say I entered that. So these numbers have to be between -90 and 90 and 0 and 360 respectively. So these are clearly incorrect numbers. And I say that I'm fine. I filled in some information about my grid. And then I keep going down, and this issue kind is at the moment just an internal thing. We don't have to worry. And I click create, which I will do, and that's it. And then I say I'm done, and it creates this view we've just been looking at. So it prints the stuff I entered. There's our resolution, region, global, our not very nice values of longitude, and if you like, that's done. It's not done, of course. So what's currently happening behind the scenes, a job's been automatically submitted to do an automated check of the content. And it's going to come back, probably not on the timescales, it takes a few minutes of this, and say your westernmost longitude is incorrect. It has to be between 0 and 360, and invite you to change it. In which case you would go to the 3 dots in the top here, like we saw, go to edit, and then I could change this to a number that's more sensible or correct, basically, for our grid. And then I save the change. And then the automated checks will run again, and so on until the automated checks pass. And I'll show you what that looks like in an issue that's already been completed. So moving over to this issue, this is one that's already been sort of signed and delivered. This is also as a horizontal grid, and it was submitted, and this bit appeared, automatic checks passed, and the pull request number 363 has been created for review. So this is the point at which a human gets involved. All the automated checks and the to and fro between you and what the automated checks are telling you all happens completely independently. There's no notification to reviewers or anything. It's only when the automated checks are passed that this pull request is created and a reviewer is notified. So I'll go to this pull request. And again, we saw this earlier. So this is then what the reviewer will look at. This is the same information, but represented in the actual file storage format. We can see, it's got all the same information there with some internal information, which we don't have to worry about. And this is an example where the review was very straightforward. I'll just scroll down. There was some automatic similarity checks where we could see there was another grid that's a bit similar, but it's clearly not the same. A human can tell. So everything was fine. And there was some AI suggested reviews, which weren't relevant. And so it was reviewed, this one by me, done. And then I reviewed it. The second reviewer, which is Dan, then gave it a very quick look, much quicker even than me, and this was merged and accepted. So that's sort of the hopeful ideal example, is that between you and the automated checks, you get everything exactly right and as you want. Then the reviewer just checks that they think it matches up with the EMD specification and any other things that they may or may not want to comment on. And that part of that component or element of the EMD is completed. I'll show you another example of one which had a little bit of a conversation. So the review wasn't an automatic, yep, this is fine, we'll save this. There were some questions. So here a pull request was generated for another horizontal grid, and I'll just scroll down past the automated generated content. And then there was, so in the review, this one again by me, certainly earlier on I was reviewing most of the grids, that's the only reason that was both me. So there was a thing I wanted to change, that there had been a description provided, but it wasn't necessary because the grid was fully defined by the controlled vocabulary parameters. So all that needed to be done was the description being deleted back in the original issue, just like we saw a few minutes ago. And so I put a link back to the original issue to make it easy to make that edit. And then as soon as that was done and saved, it fed back into the pull request so I could re-review it. So I requested changes, and then not long after that, changes were made. That prompted me to go back and have another review. I said it looked fine, and then it got merged. So that's, again, another very typical thing. Maybe there's just one little thing that was wrong. Great, get it changed. And it may be that there's nothing wrong, but it's worth something questioning. Like, oh, I see you've got your this particular value you've set to that. That could be fine. I just wanted to check because it's quite unusual for this sort of grid, say. So that's not. It might just be a query before we merge, just to double check that maybe an inadvertent mistake has crept in. That's not us as reviewers telling you what your grid should be in any way. It's just a bit of due diligence. This number seemed a bit surprising to this particular reviewer. Okay, it's fine, no problem. Just trying to make sure that these, as Dan said, because the grids get linked to the output data files, we want to make sure that they are as sort of right as possible once at the beginning, because we don't really want to be going and changing them later. And as a final example, just to show another sort of scenario, this is a vertical grid this time. So it was submitted, no problem. This one's by John, I see. And so this one had a bit more of a to and fro interaction. So I spotted that what I suspected was a typo, that two values that would normally be different were the same. So it sounded like a mistake, and that was fixed. And then there was then a question about what should be put in a particular parameter, and that was answered. And then the final grid was settled on, and all comments were addressed, and it was merged. So sometimes there can be a number of interactions depending on the sort of complexity of any potential questions that arise from the submission. So just to give you a sort of an expectation of what to expect. But most grids, at least, and that's where a lot of the fiddly detail is, are either going through first time or with a simple, oh, there's just one little thing you might want to look at. So I don't expect long, drawn-out, protracted discussions over all of the content that you submit. But it's good to be aware that it is a possibility. Yeah, so this is a good point to mention that each interaction has if you like, a time step. So there's a submission, and the reviewer might pick it up maybe the same day, maybe the next day, and they have a look at it, and maybe they ask a question, and then maybe you don't, as the submitter, pick that up till the following day. Maybe there were time zone issues, or you were busy or away, and so so even though each interaction might only last a minute or two, of course it might be spread out over a number of days whilst that conversation takes place, potentially. So it's just be aware to leave good time. If you really need your grid descriptions in by the end of the week, don't submit them all on Friday morning, because there's a very good chance that they won't all get resolved and merged and your grids created on that same day. Okay, I'll stop sharing for now. Hopefully that was insight into the sort of other end of the process after initial submission.
David, you've got one question in the chat.
Oh, great. Sorry, I hadn't seen that. Is there a long description of the short titles for the cells where you enter the info? Oh, right. So do you mean a longer definition of what those parameters mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, so for that, you really the place to go is the EMD sort of a description paper, which is in Zenodo, and I'm just slightly struggling to find the link, which should be very high up on the page. 1 second. So I will. Yeah. So I'll just share my screen again.
I've just done that. So from the documentation page on the left-hand side, we have a set of menus that kind of refer to the pages. Underneath it, we have external links, and the first one, external links, is EMD specification. So if you click on that, it opens up Zenodo, and when the PDF loads, it will be in here. There we go. And so you kind of download it. If you want reference, you can scroll through it here if you don't want to, etc., etc.
Yeah. So if you, thank you, Dan. I just, you go internet blind sometimes. So if you just searched for westernmost longitude in there, there's a complete description of how that particular parameter is defined, or X resolution, and particularly for the grid, there's a few. Some of these are slightly complicated definitions. Unfortunately, it means this. But if your grid is like this, it could mean that type of thing. So there's a couple of parts of careful reading. But that PDF on Zenodo is the canonical source upon which all of this is built. So this document came first, and then we built a software infrastructure to store information collected according to that document. So it is kind of the source of truth in that sense.
So this issue is owned by somebody. How do you propose people work together on this? Can other people edit or reuse?
Yeah, so David, can you quickly open up a form on the screen share?
Yeah.
So when you submit a form,
Yeah.
that issue kind of gets associated with the account that submits it. However, we're aware that multiple people might be contributing to it, especially when you come to the source ID stage. And we want that credit to kind of be visible. It not only kind of makes it easy for us to, if there's a problem with it, know who to contact and get some clarification of, oh, that's actually what it means for some other user, for instance, if they want to know kind of what the implications are. But it also is nice to be able to show who has been working on what. So if you just open up a new form, so just a new issue.
Oh, a new one, yeah. I can also go new issue, brings up the same thing.
Doesn't matter which one. Right at the bottom of the page, we have a section. We can ignore the issue kind, but that additional collaborators box has the intention of this. So here you would enter any collaborators, any other people that are involved with a comma, and they should also get notifications. So that commit message that happens basically creates the files and says, this is the person who's written these files, gets attributed to everyone in that box and the person who submitted the issue. And so hopefully that allows us to link. Ideally in the future, GitHub has recently allowed people to enter their org IDs on their GitHub and link them together. So if we have people's usernames, we can then also link it to their publications, and in the future that might allow people for things like citations to link them to things they've been working on, submissions and code bases on GitHub. So the idea is in the future this might be really useful. In the short term, they should get some notifications, and they will also be listed in someone who's contributed to this submission of this section.
Do correct me if I'm wrong. Is it the case that only the person who actually opened and created the new issue can edit it?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
So they get credits for the file that gets created in their name as well, but the person who has submitted the issue is the only one that can edit it, as well as the admins. So for instance, there's a handful of admins, so myself, David and Charlotte can make tweaks to an issue, but someone else generally wouldn't be allowed to. And so if it is a very tiny spelling mistake, like you've added an extra space in the middle of a name or a typo, rather than requesting the user goes back, edits it, corrects it, we might just get rid of that extra space. But in most cases, if it's a content change, we will ask the submitter to make it, because then they have approved of it and avoids.
So that's actually kind of an important thing that people need to know before they start this, because I can imagine easily that I might start working on this and quickly find that I'm not the right person to do this. And then I guess I have to, the way to address that, I'd have to delete, and I'd ask somebody else to start over. Is that
potentially? We can also copy the contents over, but I think the easiest thing would be just start a new issue and close the current one, and that would probably be the quickest way to do it, in other words. Each issue only has a handful of fields that you need to fill in, so if you've already got them written up, then that shouldn't take too long.
And this reusing of grids, can we use it across model families, and can we search for something?
Absolutely. So if you enter your grid, if there's one that's already identical to it, the automatic checker will tell you that immediately and say, oh, this is the grid with label G123, and that's great. You can then use that and reference that into your model description. Even if you didn't make that, someone created it for a different model, a grid is sort of has a life outside of the models in which they're used. And it's the same with it's true for things like model components. If someone's already described a particular atmosphere and you're using exactly the same ocean component in your model, you can just see it and link to it.
We are planning to have a way of quickly finding grids that are similar to yours. Potentially, if you wanted to see if something already exists before you filled out the form. Currently, when you fill out the form, we have that similarity checker that reviewers get to see. Well, you will see as well. That says these grids are similar, and if the same grid is there, the result will be, we'll just say use this number. So multiple people, if they're submitting the same grid, do it. There is also an automatic check. So if the entry is exactly the same, including things like description, it just immediately says, this is the grid you're after, updates the numbers on your issue. And it's as if you've submitted it, it's been approved in one step. So you don't have to wait for someone to review it. It's like, this grid exists, just use this number. It's having a nice, more user-friendly browser of it is something that's in process, but obviously we're trying to speed up the registration and approval first before we do kind of the optional extras on top.
Checking is one thing, and finding. Can I find the other similar grids?
That is something I'm working on. So hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, I might be able to. Well, I'll send out a link, and I'll bear you in mind when I do so. When we get there, if you have an idea of what you want to check, I want this type of grid with kind of these coordinates, we can potentially assist with that. And I would send an email to the emd@wcrp.cmip.org. The third alternative is if you did just fill in the form and that review panel, we can kind of talk you through how to find how similar a grid is using that. It could be one way to do it if you just wanted to make sure you weren't submitting something that was already in there, but that's in essence what the reviewer would do anyway. So there will be something. It's not quite there yet, just because there are a dozen other tasks beforehand.
Can I ask about what grid you're supposed to report? So maybe it's in the guidance document on the CMIP 7 grids. I've just started scanning through that. I hadn't looked at it before, but we have a irregular grid and we're considering gridding to a regular grid. So do we report, is this for the regular grid that we would be submitting our data on, or the computational grid?
So,
or both?
It's both. So the EMD itself is about describing the model and how it was integrated. So that's what we call the computational grid. So this is the grid that's used internally in the model. If you're also outputting your data on that same grid, then you don't need to do anything else. But if you're using like a regridded, a different output grid than is used internally in the model, then you need to create that grid also with the same form, just as a standalone entity. This is a new, say you're regridding to a half a degree grid, you've got a complicated unstructured grid inside your model, you have to describe that as it is. But for your output grid, then you also need to create the half a degree regular lat long grid and get a label for that. The reason being is these grids, or the labels of the grids in the output files, actually need to be, I'm not expressing myself, sorry. The grid label, it needs to be inside the output file itself that is archived. So every grid needs to have a label, and so if you're outputting on your integration grid, it's given a label already because you had to create those grids to do the EMD in order to get to the archive stage. But for so sorry, I've sort of put myself into corner here. Basically, yes, if you have a different output grid for your archive data, you need to create that in exactly the same way as your model grid and get a label for it. It won't get used in the in your EMD, but it does need for the ESGF archive process this label to be associated with files. I think I picked it up at the end there.
I was just thinking about what David was saying earlier about discovering that maybe you're not the right person to be filling in this information. In this morning's drop-in, someone mentioned a spreadsheet that we'd sent out to people that they could use for collating their EMD information. Does that still exist? Is that something that would be useful to share?
The spreadsheet still exists, but it's outdated, so there have been a few changes to the structure since. But the forms themselves have very obvious kind of fields. So I have a copy of just the sheet of the forms, but the easiest thing would be to open up a form, maybe put a screenshot into something like Excel or as shareable, something Google Docs wise, where multiple people can collaborate. And you can just fill out the cells next to it between yourselves and have a conversation if what conditions it is, and then just have one person input it at the end with the others as attached collaborators. So we're not providing a spreadsheet as such, but we can just write the fields of the form, but that is just as easy for users to do themselves in a format that works for them, if that makes sense. Because ultimately you will still have to fill out the same form, but if you find whatever system works for you, be it Google Docs, be it OnlyOffice, be it latex editing software that's shared between multiple people, you can just kind of copy the fields or open up a file that already exists from the repository, which is also linked. So that'd be github.com/wcrp-cmip/essential-model-documentation. And you can kind of have a copy of it, and we can kind of show you what the different fields are, which generally correspond to the forms. And so you can have that discussion and collaboration in a medium that is suitable to the user.
So we've got 3 hands up. So Dave first, then James, then Matt.
I already asked my question.
James.
Yeah, I found the spreadsheet actually really useful. I take your point, Dan, that it was circulated a while ago, and so it's not like exactly consistent with the way the forms appear. But in our group, it's basically we took for each model, the spreadsheet was shared, the relevant people filled out their bits, and I've just taken those spreadsheets and have been using them to enter the information at the EMD, and I feel that works quite well. So like again, like I agree with what you said about, you know, the spreadsheet is a little old now, and so it's not like exactly corresponding to the forms, but I feel it's clear enough. So yeah, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that, because that seems to me a useful way of working for group, because it allows people to share it, yeah, among the people in their group, and then kind of have one point of contact for the EMD entering that information. But
Okay, I have copies of the spreadsheet that are one-to-one mirror the forms. We can share them at the end of this meeting with people. The standing line, however, from CVs and EMD is that we will not be processing spreadsheets or doing that for people, but what people do themselves is up to them. So I can very easily share a spreadsheet that has the same structure as all the forms to everyone. If they do find that useful, by all means, we're not saying don't do it. It's just if you send us a spreadsheet, we will still get you to fill out the form. And so we won't be doing that side. Initially, we had 1 or 2 institutions that were ready and needed to have content of the EMD before they can start this, just through the structure of how their simulations, they already have the metadata as part of them. And so this was kind of an exception, whilst also showing what is likely to be it to other people. But the approved method of input has always been the Google Forms. So just making that clarifications, but I am more than happy to send the spreadsheets following the format.
That would be super useful. Thanks. And yeah, sorry, just I guess I didn't clarify that very well. I totally agree with you about not letting people kind of send the spreadsheet and expecting us or you or David or Charlotte or something to enter it. That's not what I meant. Like, I just meant that I have the spreadsheet, and so I've been entering the info into the forms on behalf of the group.
Yeah. I guess the only thing to be wary on the spreadsheet is that the forms have, for items that are controlled vocabularies, have constrained values. So on the spreadsheet, those might not match. Same happens with some of the grids, etc. So just be wary if you are doing that, in case some errors creep in. But yeah.
Matt was next.
Thanks. Oh, the best way for us to poke something which we think is ready for more work but doesn't seem to be getting picked up. So obviously you've got lots of things going on with all the issues, but and you're using labels like changes requested to show sort of, yeah, we think more work. We think things need to be sorted out on the issue or on the pull request. Once those have been done, what's the best way of making sure that this gets through to you for review?
If it's been over half a week and there's nothing that's happened, someone's requested changes, you've made those changes, you can, the first thing you can do is on GitHub, you can use the @ sign, so like the middle bit of the email, and the reviewer name, which should appear of the person that gave the review. You can put that into a comment and they'll get a notification. If that fails, that email that I sent, which is emd@wcrp-cmip.org, is basically the line for anything that is urgent. And that includes potentially someone having some grids that are maybe having lots of issues or having a discussion that's a little bit more difficult. We can potentially also facilitate for those kind of edge cases that need to happen quickly but have lots of questions around them, kind of a sit-down session where we have one-to-one answers, and that saves some of that back and forth between the review process. So the first port of call would be just tagging with an @ the person who's reviewed it, because they've requested the changes, they understand what's happening, they'll be able to then re-review it very quickly. And the second would be sending an email, and that email will go to all three of us, the rest of the extended review team, and the model documentation task team. So it's quite a large pool. Not everyone will be able to answer it, but someone will be able to kind of potentially get an answer or get a response in a slightly more reasonable time frame. The problem with commenting on the issues is there's currently quite a lot that we're filtering through, and when you're getting about quite a lot of notifications, it can very easily get lost. It's not intentional, it just happens. So until kind of this all settles down, i.e. the rest of CMIP-7 starts registering, it's probably going to be a little bit chaotic, so just bear with us.
Don't think we've got any other questions for just now, so if there's some more demo to do, or we can maybe just leave it for today, and we'll be sending round all the links that you'll need. Dan can also add the links to those spreadsheet formats, because Dave, you said that would be helpful for you as well. And also the recordings from the session, so people can have a look back if they want a reminder. So last chance for any final questions. No. Well, thank you very much to everyone. Have a good rest of day or evening. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Look forward to working with you.